So in today's class, we'll be looking into the Spring framework. As we already saw a framework called Struts, which is given by Apache framework. Spring is again a framework like Struts, where Spring also has a module called Spring MVC. Okay, so in Struts, if you basically see, there are two main things that we notice, like the Struts framework and one more plugin called as Struts Tails plugin. But if you see Spring is very vast and huge. So in market, like there might be different scenarios where the requirements keep changing. Like someone might look for specific modules on Spring, a different company might look into Spring on a different module. So there are many modules, out of which we'll be looking at few of them which are most frequently or most widely used or most commonly used. Okay, so as I said again, like Spring is again a framework which has a lot of modules, and this is the website for Spring, where you can always go ahead and look for all the projects that are being developed, all the materials, documentation guides or downloads. There are many, and Spring IO, Spring Boot, Spring Framework, a lot of things, Spring SD, Spring Cloud Data, lot of things are there. These are all different types of projects, but it's not mandatory that you need to know all these things. At least like you understand a few, which will be of very much helpful for you. So the first thing that we do is like I will share a link with you. Like this is the link. This link has, oh sorry, I just saw your comment. Sorry, maybe I will check it at the end of the session. Just remind me. Okay. So here I just shared a link. I hope everyone can get that link and save it somewhere. So this specific link has all the versions of jars which are available for download from the Spring framework. So what you can do is like the most recent release is like 4.2.1, which is released on 1st September 2015. So the best thing is like you can keep track of all the releases in this link, and the version of Spring that we will be looking into is like version 3. This is the most widely used in the industry. And version 4, people have started using version 4 in all the most recent projects or the new developments which are created. So version 4, there are slight enhancements when compared to version 3, and in version 4 and in the later releases there are a lot of changes where we start our people started coding for these web applications without web.xml file and all these things, which means like all the applications became pure Java applications, which means there is no need of a configurations like a config files or web.xml files or anything, but that is like a two extreme stage or more advanced. But to understand those concepts, we first need to understand the core basics always. So let's start with these things. So what I prefer is like go ahead and select this 3.2.0. If once you click on that link, you will be able to see like a release on the zip. So click on that zip where you will be able to download a certain set of jar files. So you can always grab those jar files, add it to your projects so that those projects can get the features of Spring Framework again. Okay. And let me do one thing. Folder. I'm just extracting the zip file that I have downloaded. And in the meantime, let me go ahead and show you or give you a high level overview of what exactly Spring contains mostly. Okay. In Spring, there are many modularized frameworks. So the good thing about Spring is you can choose the modules that you want to work on and you can leave the rest. Okay, which means that here, if you see here, there are a lot of many modules which are present in this architecture. The basic modules which are shown, it's not always mandatory that you use each and everything. Okay, so the first thing is like a Spring core, which is like the basic concepts of Spring. Okay, why Spring became so popular, or what exactly is it? So we'll be understanding what is Spring core. Then there is something called as a Spring AOP, aspect oriented programming, which means like in this aspect oriented programming we will see how exactly Spring has reduced the day-to-day work that we do. And the next thing is like Spring DAO, for data access layer. I hope everyone is clear of what exactly is a DAO. DAO is a design pattern where we can write a lot of database connectivity code in these kind of classes. Okay, so for writing DAO, there are many ways that is defined in the Spring. And ORM, we'll look into ORM like Hibernate, IBATIS, many things, which means like Spring gives features for all this stuff. And JEE and web. In web, there is one thing called as Spring MVC, Spring Web MVC. This is one of the features that we'll be looking into. Apart from MVC, there are many other features that Spring has given where it can integrate with struts or JSF or Velocity. These are all different frameworks. Okay, so these are all multiple features that Spring has given us. And as I already said, the good thing about Spring is you can choose whichever module you want to build your application. You can choose those modules and leave the rest. You can say like, hey, I would like to work with Spring MVC, and then would like to work with Spring Core, and then with Spring Hibernate. Then you can leave all the rest of the modules. So that is one combination you are trying to choose. Okay, like this many people choose different types of combinations. So let's try to start understanding the concepts of Spring from basics, and then try to build a web application using Spring also. Okay, and why Spring became so famous and popular is because of this modularized concept. And also Spring is makes the development part easy by giving us a lot of annotations. So when I say annotations, maybe in code Java you might have seen something like at the rate override and a couple of other things which will say like some meaningful information about the methods or whatever we are trying to write. So in the same way, there are a lot of annotations which are given in a Spring, which makes or which reduces the amount of code that we write. Okay, so when trying to write some configurations here, we will try to compare Spring with struts, and we will try to see like how Spring has reduced the number of lines that we try to write in a project when compared to struts. Okay, so we'll start working or looking into this Spring core concepts today, and we'll go into the web later. Okay, so first thing is I just extracted all these files, and if you see lib, in the lib there are many jar files which are something like, if you see here, Spring AOP for AOP module, aspects for aspects module, for beans, context, core. Spring core is one module, the basics which we start with. Spring expressions, like that. There are many modules. So if you are using a specific module, you can pick and choose those kind of jars and add it to your workspace. Okay, so the first thing that I would like to do is like everyone once means all the projects that I would be sharing across with you will be shared without the jar files. So make sure that you go ahead, download the jars from this location, and the version that we are using is 3.2.0. So make sure that you use that specific link to download the jars and add them to your workspace. Okay, to the class path later when you create the projects. So the first and the basic concept that we will understand in the first example today here is why Spring, or what is the advantage of using the Spring over all the traditional way of coding that we are doing right away. Okay, so for that, what I'm trying to explain here is like I'm not going to create a web or dynamic web project or a Maven project or anything. I'm just going to create a simple Java project, explain some basic features. Okay, so I say file, new, just a basic Java project, Spring Basics. So here, what I do is like the first two classes or first few classes that I create are like trying to show the existing way of coding that we do, and the next step is how to do a similar kind of coding using a Spring framework. That is what I will show. So in the first example, let me ask one question to everyone. If I have an object, sorry, if I have a class called machine, and if I want to create an object of machine inside a class demo, how do I create the object? What is the syntax? Very basic and straightforward question. Machine m equal to, or machine mch equal anything equal to new machine. So in our traditional approach, all we do is we use a keyword called new in order to create an object, right? That's the most basic thing. So what I will do here is I will take this a simple example and I will try to show the same concept. Okay, the first example would be very simple, straightforward, core concepts. Create a package com dot java dot without Spring. And here the name that I would like to give is like I will create three different classes. So the first one is like a car class. So inside the car class I will write one method, basic method, public void move this out. Car is moving, public void red. Okay, so now the concept here is, let us assume that there is a company called Enterprise which wants to do a car business. Okay, Enterprise wants to do a car business, so they created some software where they have some like car class which can move and which can give for rent and many other features. Okay, now the next thing that I will do here is let me create a class called Traveler. Okay, and today if a traveler comes to my company and if he wants to rent a car, okay, so some logic that I write inside this would look like this. I create an object for car and I say car dot rent. Okay, so the basic scenario here is when I want to create or when I want to call a method rent, all I do is create an object for a car class, and the specific syntax would look like this: car car equal to new car. So I would like every one of you to understand that I'm using a keyword called new. Okay, so this is what we know for creating an object. Well and good, there's nothing wrong, everything looks good. Now after some time the company Enterprise decides that, hey, I no longer want to do a car business, I want to do a bike business. Okay, the company wants to do a bike business. So what I do is like I go here and I say bike business. So means the company decides that since it has some experience doing business with cars, it wants to go ahead and do a bike business, and they want to stop the car business. They want to go ahead and I'm just giving a simple scenario. Want to do a bike business since they don't have any experience in dealing with pets or any groceries or anything. They don't want to do some business like a Walmart or some pet stores or whatever. So they want to do a similar kind of business like a bike business. So if I want to go ahead and change the business logic behind that I have coded initially, what I do is like I create a complete brand new bike class, and even in the bike class I can always go ahead and say like it can move and rent, and I can say here like bike is moving and can rent a bike. Okay, so in the traveler.java, now when a traveler comes, what I do is like I can no longer rent a car. Why? Because enterprise is no longer doing a car business. It wants to rent a bike. So the logic that I needs to change will be like I need to rewrite almost my entire logic that I have created. So I need to delete these things, okay, whichever I have created, and I need to say bike be equal to new bike b dot rent. Okay, now in this concept I am trying to change, means I'm just showing you one simple example, but in real time if you need to do this there is a lot of code that you always needs to change, which means you should comment all the code that is present for the car. You should comment everything out or remove everything out, and you should write a new class called bike and call all the related methods. Okay, bike dot rent, and one more method that we wrote is like bike dot move, b dot move. Like that we should call different methods. Now let us assume that after some time, after some years, the enterprise company wants to do, instead of a bike business, they want to do a boat business. So what is the code change that you need to do? Again, you need to create a class called boat, and in this traveler class you need to comment out or delete all the code that you have written for bike, and you need to rewrite the concept for a boat, right? So if you understand the scenario, what exactly is happening in the traveler class? In the traveler class, I'm trying to rewrite my entire logic. Why I'm trying to rewrite? Why? Because the class that I have created, bike or car, for them, if I am trying to create objects in the traveler class, I'm using a keyword called new, and I'm saying a new car or a new bike, which tightly binds the traveler class and the bike or the car class. So there is a tight coupling between the classes. Okay, so right now I'm not sure how far you can completely understand this example, but once I explain the concept of Spring, you can clearly understand like what I'm talking about. But the concept is very simple. When I say new bike, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a tight dependency between the traveler class and the bike class. When I say tight dependency, each is dependent on the other. If the traveler is trying to take a bike as a rent, it is fine. But tomorrow if the traveler comes and requests for a boat where enterprise wants to do a boat business, all I need to do is I need to remove everything. Why? Because this is of no longer use in my class. So I need to change my entire code to both. So what exactly the Spring says is, hey, this way of creating an object using a variable called, using a keyword called new, creates a tight dependency between the classes, which is very difficult for you to maintain the code in future. So this is not the better way. That's what Spring says. Okay, so Spring said that this is not a better way of coding now. So what I say to Spring is, okay Spring, you said that this is not a better way. Then let me show you one more better way. That is what I am about to tell to Spring. Okay. So let us assume that me and the Spring are trying to compete here. So in the next example, I will say that to the Spring, hey Spring, let me modify my code in such a way that I can make some minimum changes, okay, and can make sure that that code is a little bit better for maintainability and reuse in future. So I say com dot easy interfaces. Okay, here I will do. Let me go copy these two. So in this with interfaces, what I do is like I will start coding two interfaces. The most important thing, I will say an interface called vehicle, and here in this I will say public void rent, public void move. I've created two methods in an interface, and then I say that I create a class called car, and I say in the interfaces, see I can always go ahead after I create a class, I can say implements vehicle. I can hard code it and write, or for this interface is what I can say add, and I can say hi. Say okay. So do you see here? It shows the interface that it is trying to implement is this one. So as soon as I say finish, it writes the code for me by default. Implements vehicle. It implements the unimplemented methods. Okay, so the unimplemented methods are move and rent. So I have just implemented saying that car is moving and car can rent a car. These are the two methods that I've created. Now the same old step that I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a class called traveler, and here I say a main method. In the previous scenario, let me write a simple scenario, car equal to new car. This is what I have written. So now I say that, hey, I'm not going to write as per line number 7. I'm going to make a little bit of modification here. So what I do here is I will say I will start coding two interfaces. So I say vehicle vh equal to new car, and I say here vh dot rent. Okay. So now if I go ahead and run this one, what it shows, it goes ahead and calls the car class rent method and says can rent a car. Okay, can rent a car. Now let us assume that the enterprise company wants to do a bike business instead of car. So I say bike, create a class called bike which implements vehicle. Let me add the unimplemented methods. Okay, so again bike is implementing these two things. Now see here, the once the enterprise in this scenario wants to do a bike business instead of the car business, what I do is like, see, let us assume that in the previous scenario, move, okay, this still calls the car class methods only. See here, can rent a car, car is moving, both are good. Now if I want, or if the enterprise wants to do a bike business, the code changes will be minimal. So what I do is like, instead of saying new car, all I say is new bike. I will leave the rest of the logic as is, which means like If I go ahead and run this class right now, it will show can rent a bike, bike is moving. See here. See, can rent a bike and bike is moving. What happened in this scenario? When I started coding to interfaces, I reduced the amount of code that I need to change in future. Okay, and I said that this is one of the better ways of coding, and this is like a more enhanced version rather than the previous one. And I said that this is easy for maintainability. This is what I told to Spring. So let us see what Spring says now. Okay, before that, is the concept clear till this point to everyone? If you understand the problem, you can understand how Spring resolves the problem. If not, it will be very, very difficult for you. Okay, very good. Now, I'm just reiterating the two sentences and then I will go and say what Spring is telling in this context. The first scenario, what I said is like without Spring, okay, just a package I'm talking about. In this, when I created bike class and car class, and in the Traveler, when I started coding, I said that new car or new bike, what I had to do is like I had to change the entire logic in order to call or in order to reuse or recreate the same old logic for a different set of classes. But when I started using interfaces, all I can do is like vehicle equal to new car initially. Then here I can come back and say new bike, and I can leave the rest of the logic as is, saying that hey, I will not touch the actual implementation logic below, but I will just change the way the object is created from new car to new bike. That is what I said. Okay. Now, in this context, like this is one of the most preferable ways, like coding to interfaces is better in a real-time scenario. Why? Because in general, I'm talking about. Why? Because you have a greater flexibility of changing, and there is a limitation in this concept. If you understand the limitation, let us assume that enterprise wants to do an animal business, a pet animal business, a cat business. Okay, when enterprise wants to do a cat business, my question to everyone: can I say vehicle equal to new cat? Can I do that? Yes or no? Very good. The answer is no, we cannot do that. So that is a limitation everywhere. Why? Because cat does not belong to the vehicle hierarchy. So if enterprise wants to do a cat business, then the existing software that they are using right now for renting out cars, whatever they are having, will never ever suit for a pet animal software. Okay, they cannot create it. But if they want to change it to something like a bike, for renting out bikes and all those things, they can slightly tweak here and there. It's not slightly, in a real time, it is a greater amount of work. But rather than scrapping the entire project, they can always go back and change something in the background or back end and reuse the project if they need. But 99% of the time, it will never happen. But what if that is the case, it happens like you need to remodify your structure and all these things, right? So the limitation here is always ensure that the classes that you are trying to reuse must belong to the same hierarchy. Why? Because car and bike belongs to the same hierarchy of a vehicle. That is the reason why I'm able to change it at line number 8. Okay, hope that is clear to everyone. Now I told the same old concept to Spring and said Spring that hey, look at here Spring, see how I'm able to easily maintain my code and how it helps me in making sure that the code whatever I'm writing needs very minimum changes when I want to go ahead and change some functionalities in the background. Now Spring comes up with a different answer. Spring says that hey, even in this way of coding, what you need to do is you need to go ahead, change your Java logic, and Spring says that at any point of time, if you go ahead and change your Java logic, there is always a probability that you might break your code. So you must check, or you must do a testing from end to end. When I say end to end, Spring says that you must check all the logic from end to end, like what exactly is happening, what are the methods it is calling. Again, means you need to run a lot of testing. Okay, so Spring says that the way that you need to code and the way that you need to maintain still is not as flexible as you say. That is what Spring says. I hope everyone understood the problem here. As and when I change the code from new car to new bike, I am making the changes in the Java class, which means I need to recompile my code entirely. I need to deploy that project. But once I'm changing something in the Java file, I'm not sure where exactly it might break. Okay, so I need to do a lot of rigorous amount of testing for my entire application or that entire specific flow, and then only I can confirm that nothing else breaks. So that is what Spring says. Now I say that, okay, Spring, show me the way that you can resolve this problem. Okay, that is what I ask Spring. So here is the way like Spring tries to explain this concept. Okay, so for that what I do is, so here team, like what I need is like I need some basic set of jar files and one XML file. Okay, I hope everyone is clear about like structs-config.xml, right? It has a specific, in this structs-config.xml, if you notice, we are able to use some structs given pre-defined tags. How did we get these things? By adding specific set of DTDs here, right? The same old case, I need a specific set of DTDs for writing a Spring file. Okay, maybe if you can download some project from the internet, you can always get that, some sample project. So let me go back to an existing project and get those stuff. Let me see. Okay, I copy an existing file, Control V. Okay, that is all what I need. So I just bought in an XML file. So the XML file name can be anything, but the traditional file name is like string-beans.xml with all these XSDs and all the related tags. Okay, so with all these tags, I can start writing some string-related files there. So I'm not sure if I have the jar files. Maybe I'll do one thing like I'll go ahead and add the jar files present in the location where I downloaded it from. So this is the location where I have downloaded all the jar files. So right now even I don't need all these jar files. I need only few. Let me go ahead and add for time being those classes. So I right click on the project, say build path, configure build path, and I go to the second tab like libraries tab. In the libraries tab I say add external jars and control A, open. Okay, so in this specific project, if you see the reference libraries, I have added everything. So ideally, means as I already said, we don't need all these jars. Basically we need some Spring core jars, and along with some Spring core jars we need some common bean jars and all. So once you add all these things, your project will get the Beans Spring support. Okay, now the next thing is we'll come to this Spring Beans.xml file later. So let me show you an example how Spring helps us to resolve this problem. So in this way, like what I do is like I will take the same old example of what I did till now, like a vehicle, traveler, car, bike, and I will try to show how Spring resolves this problem. So for that, let me do one thing. Let me copy the entire code into this with Spring, and we don't need a cat here. Remove the cat. Now, in this concept, if you notice here, the first thing we said car C equal to new car. Then I said something like vehicle V equal to new car. That is what I said. Now, see here. I go to a traveler class, and in the traveler class, what Spring says is, hey, whenever you want to create objects, okay, never ever use new. Okay, so you see a keyword called new here. So never use a keyword called new for creating objects. If you use a keyword called new, you will be tightly coupling the current class called traveler and the dependent class, means the class in it like a bike. You're trying to make sure that you're trying to create a tight coupling between them. So don't use a keyword called new like this and create objects. There is a different way. I will tell you. If you can use that way, then the classes that you are trying to use will be loosely coupled. Okay. So let us see how Spring helps us in resolving the issue. So let me comment out this code also. Okay. So let me comment out that code, and the next thing is like team. What I would like you to do here is again go to the same old website tutorialspoint.com/spring. There are many websites, but this one I find like more precise, simple, and short. Okay, go to Spring website and start learning the concept of Spring. And at some places, like if by any chance if you see Spring version 2.5, okay, anything below 3 or 3.2, I prefer like not to go ahead and not to read anything in those tutorials, or don't practice those problems also. Means I'm not saying don't practice those problems. If you can practice, like it would give you some insight, but sometimes you will get confused looking into those old examples actually. Okay, so start looking into some any tutorials which show as 3 or 3.2 and above. Okay, so why? Because that 3 has a major release, or 3.2 has a major enhancements when compared to the previous version actually. Okay. Now what I prefer is like you start go ahead and read all these basic simple concepts where it explains like what are the different uh, basic principles that you need to understand in Spring. Okay. Now coming back to our example, the first thing that I show or that I tell here technically related to Spring is something like application context. Okay, I will explain you what is this. So there is a concept called Spring container. Okay, there is a concept called Spring container. So what exactly Spring tells is, hey, if you want an object, you tell the Spring container to give an object for you, and the Spring container will give an object. Okay, so the basic concept is like line number 7 and 8, understand very carefully, like line number 7 and 8, never ever use a new keyword on your own and create an object. Rather, if you want a car object, ask the Spring container, it will give it for you. If you want a bike object, ask the Spring container, the Spring container will give it for you. Okay, now a question for everyone: in Spring, who will create objects for you? Very good. The Spring container creates objects for you. Now, the second question. Will the Spring container know what objects to create for you? Yes or no? I hope everyone got this concept. Now, I guess Spring Beans.xml, I hope everyone understands what is the concept of Spring Beans.xml. Not even a single wrong answer. So, Spring container will never know what objects the user needs unless the user tells the container. Okay, unless the user tells the container. So the the example or the code that I'm writing at line number 12 is a very standard basic code which tells invoke the Spring container and tell the Spring container about all your classes. Okay, let me complete few lines of code, explain step by step. So I say application context and control shift okay, app context equal to new class path XML application context, and here see what is that I am going to write here. My Spring Beans.xml file is inside a package. Okay, it is inside a package. See, notice here inside this package it is there. So what I do is I write here com slash and always make sure that whatever namings everything you write package names are right here with Spring slash Spring hyphen beans dot xml. Control S, save it, and I do Control Shift O to import that application context. Okay, did you notice here there are two things that you imported? They are all from the Spring context, Spring framework package. Application context is one, and class path application context is one. So line number 15, if you want to understand in simple terms, creating a Spring container, okay, the application context is nothing but it is creating a Spring container and telling the Spring container that hey, go ahead and read this XML file. Okay, go ahead and read the XML file. Now understand my question and answer it. In this Spring Beans.xml, in this Spring-Beans.xml, if I can define all my classes, will the Spring container know what objects to create for me? Yes or no? Yes, very good. The answer is yes. Okay. So let me show that in a simple terms. So the next step that I am going to do is the first step that I did is created a Spring context, a Spring container, and told the Spring container to go ahead and read an XML file which is present in this location. This is what I did in the first step. Now, when the Spring container goes ahead and tries to read this XML file, at present the XML file is empty, but what I do is like I will go ahead and configure some classes here. So what I do is the first step, see, I've already copied the code for car and bike already, but let me only start with car here initially. Okay, so what I do here is I use a tag called bean, and in that bean tag let me use a property called as id. Okay, id is any random name that you want to give. Id that so here I say vehicle obj. I gave the id as vehicle obj, and here I do something like write my class definition here. Class equal to what is my class? Com dot easylearn java dot. Okay, once I did that configuration, let me go ahead and check if I did a right configuration or not. I press control and hover my mouse on it. Yes, I can go to that car class, which means all I did is a right configuration. Okay, now I come back to this and say that, hey, this is an ID that I have given like vehicle object and a car. This is the actual class name. Okay, fully qualified class name. That is what I gave here. Now notice here at line number 15 I'm creating a container, and now the container reads this XML file. And my question to everyone, once the container reads this XML file, will the container know that there is a class called car at com.easylearnjava with Spring? In that package there is a class called car. Will the container know this or not? Very good. The answer is yes. Okay. Why? Because the container reads this XML file and understands the tag that I have written at line number 15. Okay. The answer is yes. Now, the Spring container knows that there is a class called car. Understand very carefully. Once the Spring container knows about the car, the next step that I do is, what did I say, or what did Spring say? Hey, don't use new for creating car or bike objects. You ask me. That is what Spring told. Now let us go ahead and ask the Spring container to give an object for you. Okay, so what is the object that you will be getting now? A car object. So I say that vehicle, car is implementing vehicle. So vehicle equal to, see here, I'm no longer writing new car, rather I will be asking the Spring container to give. See how I'm asking? App context. See, app context, that is what I have declared at line number 15. So I will ask that app context. So app context dot get me what is that I have declared here. Things are very simple. What is that I have declared here? I have declared a bean. So what I say is app context dot get bean, and in this I will give the ID. What is the ID for a class that I have given? Vehicle obj. So vehicle obj I will give here. I'll go ahead and I will say, and the next thing maybe everyone needs to understand here is like this is, it returns an object. The type mismatch cannot convert from object to vehicle. Why? Because it gives an object for us. I will cast it to vehicle. Okay, I'm casting the output, type casting to a vehicle. So now line number 16 is nothing but vehicle equal to new car. That is the concept. But instead of writing a new, we are asking the Spring container to, hey, Spring container, get me a bean which has an ID called vehicle obj. As soon as I say vehicle obj, what will the Spring container do is, the Spring container will go and go to this Spring beans.xml file. Okay, the Spring container will go to this file, and in this file it will search for bean tags, and it will check, hey, are there any bean tags with an ID called vehicle obj, yes or no? So it can find this vehicle obj here, and the Spring container understands that, okay, when the user says vehicle obj, it means he needs a car object. So the Spring container creates an object for car and gives it to you. Okay, clear with the first step, how Spring is creating an object? So now I say here vehicle dot, I can say like move or vehicle dot rent, I can say anything, vehicle dot rent. Okay, once I go back and run this, Something went wrong. One second. Java.lang.class not found. Oh, okay. So I will show you how to resolve these kind of issues. Or the other thing is like this is when Maven comes into picture. So when you use a Maven and give a dependency of a Spring, it will automatically download the related jar files for us. Okay, so when I'm using this kind of Spring framework, you need these things. So once you find these kind of issues, so how to resolve them is like, see here, caused by this class not found, right? So take this exception and paste it in Google. So getting this class not found, or an easiest way that I can say to fix it, once it shows that that is an exception, it says class not found, it means that that specific jar file is not present. So go back to your exception and see org.apache.commons.logging.logging factory. This is a jar file package which is missing. So space jar. Okay, if you say that, there are a lot of repositories that comes up for downloading the charts. You can click on anything. If you click on this Java 2s, you can click on this, come to the bottom and select on this, click on this one, and you can download this zip file and add the chart to your workspace. Or you can go to the Maven repository. Let's see, or the Apache Commons. Okay, Apache Commons. Okay, Commons logging. So you can get that. Or for time being, what I do is like, let me go to an existing project and get it. That is how you always go back and search for some stuff. Spring basics. Okay, I do have some lib. So what I do is, let me copy all the jars from here. Copy that path, and let me do one thing. Build path, configure build path. I remove all the external jars. While removing, make sure that you don't remove this JRE. Okay, so remove that and add external jars from the new location. So apart from the Spring jars, you need some, see, MySQL, that's later, that right now we will not be looking into this. This is for connecting to the database, and you need some other basic jars, actually commons, logging, and log4j, sl4j, some basic jars that you need actually. So select everything, open, say okay. Now it should be good, like it has all the reference libraries. So what I will do is like, maybe I will try to, tomorrow I will try to explain the similar version with the Maven. Then we will see like just adding one or two dependencies will download everything else into our project, so we need not worry about adding multiple jars anymore. Okay, so now let me go ahead and run it. So did you notice here it shows car is moving, can rent a car. So what happened in this scenario? The scenario shows that instead of we creating an object, the Spring container has given an object for us. This is step one. Till step one, is it clear to everyone like how we resolved the problem first? Okay, good. Now going to the next step. In the next step, let us assume that the same old concept. Enterprise doesn't want to do a car business. They want to do a bike business. So what I do is, what Spring says is, hey, all my coding in Java is done. I will never ever go and touch my Java code. Rather, what I will do is I will come back to my configuration file and I will just go ahead and change from car class to bike class. See, right now I already have a bike, so I did not again code it. Okay, so ideally I will write a bike class and I will go ahead and just change my configuration from car to bike. Again, when I make this change, always make sure that there is a restriction for me. Car or bike, both should inherit from the same interface. That is one restriction. Okay, so once I do that, see what is the change that I made here. I just made a configuration file change. Then when I go to my Java file and when I run it, line number 15 will create an application context. Means it creates a container, and in the container when I say, hey, give me a bean with an ID vehicle obj, it goes to the bean and it looks at the bean and figures out that okay, this vehicle obj is nothing but for a bike object. So it goes ahead and it creates a bike object now and gives it back to you. See, before I run traveler.java now, just notice that the previous output is calling a car class. Now, I did not touch anything in my Java code, so I went ahead and when I ran it, did you notice here? It shows calling a bike. Bike is moving, can rent a bike. Now, did you notice here, or can anyone tell me, is traveler and any other class, is it tightly coupled? Either the car or bike, or in future if they want to do a boat business or a flight business or anything, are they tightly coupled here? The traveler and the next coming classes, they are never tightly coupled. All we do is I go ahead and change my configurations in such a way that I can never ever touch my Java code anymore. This is how Spring says that you don't create objects, tell me to create objects, I can create objects for you and give it to you. Okay, now let us assume that someone might ask the question, hey, what if enterprise wants to do both businesses? Okay, so if they want to do both business, then all you do is, okay, before I write some code at line number 17, a quick question to everyone. In spring beans.xml, can I have two classes with the same ID? Like bike and car both have the same ID as vehicle obj, yes or no? Very good. The answer is no. Why? Because when I request the Spring container to give an object which has an ID vehicle obj, again it comes here and it checks. If something is with vehicle obj like bike and also car, it gets confused saying that, hey, what exactly you want me to create, either a bike object or a car object? But that's never going to happen. Why? Because if you see this example, so I say here as car, and if you see this example, it is not allowing you to write two different classes with the same ID. You notice here the value vehicle obj of attribute ID on element bean is not valid with respect to this type ID, which means like it cannot have a duplicate ID here. Okay, so I say vehicle. Now in the next context, okay, see here what I am trying to do here is vehicle equal to vehicle. Okay, I can say vehicle, but let me change this name and this ID name. There is nothing wrong here, but just to make sure that, means if I run it, it will always, means just notice here. When I ask for vehicle obj here, the first two will print something related to bike. When I ask for vehicle, it will go ahead and look for vehicle here and will give me a car object. So the next two will print something related to car. Let me just print out this out here. Okay, very good. So what is wrong here? Let me check. with Spring.car is not present. No class definition found. Very good. Oh, okay, something went wrong here. So when I press on control, oh, caps. Okay, thank you. Yeah, even that's what happened. Like when I press control, it is not changing into a hand symbol where I can click it. Okay, now it is good. So it should work fine now. Okay, so car is moving, car can rent a car. Second scenario. The first scenario is bike is moving and can rent a bike. Okay, so everything is good. Let me change it to VHOBJ and here also VHOBJ. On this once again. Okay, everything is good. It's running. Now with this example, the next thing, this is this I showed in order to make sure that if someone asks like, hey, if I want to have both, can I have two different classes in the beans? Answer is yes. So the beans.xml file is something, if you have 100 classes for which you want to create objects, what you will do is you will create all the 100 objects, or you will make entries for all the 100 objects in this beans.xml and tell the Spring container to read it. So as and when the Spring container reads this beans.xml file, it understands that, okay, this is what I need to, these are all the objects that I need to build when these specific set of IDs are called. That is what it understands, and it goes ahead and keeps it, means reads them. And whenever someone asks for vehicle obj, it creates a car object and gives it to you. So is it clear how Spring container helps us in creating objects? Okay, that's good. Now the next step that we are going ahead is like, now first I started to understand how I can create an object. Well and good. The next thing that I'm going to understand here is like, hey, when I create an object, can I inject some default values? See, when I say can I inject some default values, means the basic concept that should come to your mind is like constructor, right? Why? Because when I have a student class in our old scenario, when I have a student class with ID, name and age, when I create a constructor student s equal to new student, by default all the values will be, if id is int, it will be 0, then if it is string and int, it will be null and 0, which means all the default values will be assigned. Now does that happen the same way in Spring? Yes, it happens the same way in Spring. Next question. In a regular way, I can always go ahead and write a constructor where I can assign some values during object creation. So in Spring, can I do the same thing where I can add some values saying that, hey, these are all some specific set of values that I want to default to the properties in a class when I'm trying to create an object for it. Like I want to always make sure that the school name is BHPV, or the student grade student class is always like that. Can I do that? Yes, I can do that. So let's see how Spring gives us that option. So whatever concepts that we're seeing, these are all the basic concepts in Spring. Okay. So the next thing that we are trying to see here is how we can inject some values. Okay. So the technique that we will be looking here right now is called as constructor injection. Maybe the name itself might suggest you or might give you an understanding saying that we are trying to inject some values using a constructor. Okay. So the next example that I write here is like a class called address, and in this address I will say private string. So let me create source, generate getters and setters, Control Shift F, format the code. Okay. So I've created a simple address class here, and now I'll create question to everyone. How will I create an address object here? Will I say address A equal to new address, yes or no? Okay, what happened to everyone? Are you following? I just asked a question like, what is the way to create an address object here? Address A equal to new address. Is it right or wrong? Okay, so that is what we are trying to understand right now. Spring tells us never ever use a keyword called new. Okay, never use new. So again I'm asking a question. Is the syntax address A equal to new address? Is that way of creating an object for address, is that right or wrong? Very good. It is a wrong concept. Now we will not use that concept. So we don't prefer to do that. We prefer to do it in a different way. So what is that we do? We tell the Spring container to create an object for us. Now, in order to tell the Spring container to create an object, what is the first thing that you need? You need to declare, or you need to create a Spring container, and you need to tell the Spring container to read a basic config file, right? So do you have a config file? Yes, we can have a config file like springbeans.xml. So what I do is like, let me copy that springbeans.xml from here and paste it in this package, and remove the unnecessary bean entries. So in this springbeans.xml, I will make an entry for the address class bean id equal to some obj address obj class equal to home dot easylearn java dot constructor injection dot address. Yes, so I made a right configuration, everything is good. Now I go back to address, sorry, demo.java, and I will tell the demo.java like, hey, create a Spring container and ask the Spring container to give an address object. So now my next question to everyone, what is the specific value that I need to pass to the Spring container to tell it to create an address object for me, an object for this class? Yeah, very good. The one which is present in the ID, which is nothing but address obj. It's not address, it's address obj. Okay, understand that this very specific name that you need to give, which is highlighted here, and it's nothing apart from that. So let me again copy some existing code, means this code line number 15 and 16 which is present in this class. Okay, just line number 15 let me copy and use it in demo.java. So I've created a context, so com easy java. Here let's say constructor injection, excuse me. So the next thing I say is address add equal to typecasting the output to address, and here I say app context dot get bean of. See here I'm giving a specific ID. If you notice the ID that I'm trying to pass, it is nothing but the one which I gave in Spring Beans.xml, which is address obj. Okay. So my next question to everyone: will line number 11 create an address object? Yes or no? Very good. Answer is yes. What is the city that it populates for me? So I say add dot get city. What is the output? See, the answer is very simple, very basic answer. It is null. Why? Because by default in an object, if I write all means I write a string, all the strings will be defaulted to their default value, which is nothing but null. Okay, so line number 11 is almost equivalent to address add equal to new address, but here we are not creating on our own, we are asking the Spring container. So once I execute this one, oh, what is no being named address obj address is defined. So see here team, anytime you get some errors, go ahead, read the log files and understand this. See, it shows no such bean definition exception. No bean named address obj is defined. That is what it says. So here I'm asking for address obj. It says there is no bean with this specific name. So I go to this file and say addre, okay, ss, naming mistake, okay. Like that you go ahead, read those exceptions and you can easily understand what is going wrong. Okay, I go ahead and run it once again. Notice here I got the city as null. Okay, now the concept here that we're trying to understand here is, if there is a probability of injecting some default values while the objects are being created, can I do it using Spring? The answer is yes, we can do it using Spring. So how can I do it? So the concept is very easy. The first thing that we need is a parameterized constructor in this class. So I use again the feature of Eclipse. Say source, generate constructor using fields. Selected everything. Okay. Say OK. So it creates a constructor for me with all the fields. Control Shift F, format it. Now the second change and the most important change that I do is in the Spring Beans.xml. In the Spring Beans.xml, what I do is, see here, notice carefully, in between the two bean tags, all I do is I use one more tag called constructor argument. Constructor arg. The name itself says that I am trying to use an argument in constructor. Okay, constructor arg. and here I say in the constructor arg name equal to line 1, and the value that I want to inject is, and the next constructor arg that I give here is all the parameters that I'm writing, line 1, line 2 city, state, control shift F, format the code. Okay, see here, what did I do? I used a tag called constructor argument and said line 1, line 2, city, state, and zip. I will explain this in a while. Okay, let's see what happens when I go back and run my demo.java once again. uh, one second. Illegal argument exception. Okay, local variable name never discovered, line 1, line 2, city, state, zip, line 1, line 2, city, state, zip. Okay, all look good. Now what is the mistake here? Local variable table parameter name discover. Line 1, line 2, city, state, zip. Do you see any changes in those names here? No, first one it clearly shows line 1 itself here. So
Hello.
it is line 1, L is small itself.
No, no, in Spring Beans.
It's good.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, let me do one thing. Let me change it here slightly. Now, let me change this a little bit and write one more. Oh, okay. Public address. One second. It needs a default construct also. I think that is the issue. Uh, constructor resolver. Let me make a simple change here. Let me delete this and write one constructor saying that public address string city this dot city equal to city is what I say. And here I go back to my Spring Beans.xml and Okay, let me run it. Oh, what is that? Argument exception. Void local variable. Yeah, that is good construct injection. String hyphen b instead XML address. Oh, city. It's very strange. One second. Is something related to the dependencies. Okay. Oh, insecure website. No, this is some different error that I'm looking into. It's not looking too good. The basic concept here, what it does is like it goes to this class, address class, and it looks for an address constructor, and it tries to inject, use this city name here in the constructor argument city, and then injects this value Dallas into that. It's very weird and very strange, like why it is showing like this exception.